Hi there, sociology students. So today we are embarking on a new topic. Now that we know a little bit about culture and society, now we're going to talk about social structure, try that again, and what that means for us, and social integration. So how do we fit within our society, okay? So first off, we're going to talk about kind of the two views on these particular pieces. We have macro sociology, which focuses on broad features of the society. So conflict theorists, who we'll talk about a little bit more, and functionalists use this approach to analyze such things as social class and how groups are related to one another. So an example is transience, which is something that we're going to be talking about throughout to use as that particular example, okay? Microsociology is the analysis of social life that focuses on social interaction, typically used by symbolic interactions, okay? And these social interactions are what people do when they're in one another's presence, so communications at a distance is included. Basically anything and everything we do when we are in contact with other people, okay? So sociologists are supposed to use both macro and micro levels of analysis to study social life. Just like in economics, you look at it from a macro and micro level. Same thing happens in sociology, okay? So those who use macro sociology to analyze the homeless or transients, the people that we are looking at, for example, would focus on broad aspects of society, such as the economy, social class, etc. Sociologists who use the micro-sociology approach would analyze how people interact with one another. So this photo illustrates social structure. The disparities between poor and powerlessness are amply evident in this. And it also illustrates this at the micro level, which is the isolation of this man. Okay, so you can see the macro and micro even within this photo. So macro and micro sociology for transients, right? So on the macro level, we'd look at like these men who are located at the bottom of the U.S. The social class system, that's broad, that's big, right? Low status means less opportunities. Again, broad, not very specific, okay? Few job skills, little education, hardly anything to offer employers, and forced to sometimes, quote unquote, hustle to survive. That would be what we would study on a macro sociology level. But on a micro sociology level, we would look at kind of the interactions, right? So men's rules, codes for getting along, survival strategies, how to divide up resources, relationships that these men or women might have with family and friends, where they spend their time and what they do, language and pecking order, okay? All of these things are looked at with micro sociology. So you can see a big difference between what we look at the macro level versus the micro level, okay? So the macro sociological perspective on social structure. Really, to better understand human behavior, we need to understand what a social structure is, which is the framework of society that was already laid out before you were born, or the typical patterns of a group, such as the usual relationship between men, women, students, teachers, okay? So one of my favorite stories to talk about with this is social structure. It's been around for a very long time, right? Throughout history, and it just depends on what societies we're looking at. We can see these particular pieces. So in, say, like my world history courses, when I used to teach AP world history, I would have kids that would tell me multiple times in their essays over the course of the entire year, if we were talking about relationships between men and women, we're looking at social status, it always popped up that women were always the people that stayed home and took care of the kids, and that didn't change. So if we're talking about change and continuity over time, that was what they would say, okay? And that is definitely a macro-sociological perspective, looking at the relationships between men and women. Thankfully, that is changing, and my husband is an amazing parent. In fact, sometimes I feel like he is way better than I am and is better at taking care of my kids. So that is just an idea for social structure. It's something that you're born into. It's not going to be something that's constructed generally after you are born, okay? So the sociological significance of social structure is that it really guides out our behavior, okay? It is important to know that anything that you do within your social structure is generally something that was already prescribed to you, okay? And you'll see what I mean as we continue to talk about this. So really, it tends to override our personal feelings and desires because it was there before we started desiring anything. So, in conclusion, for this piece, people learn their behaviors and attitudes because of their location in their social structure, whether those are privileged, deprived, or in between somewhere. which most of us are on the in-between, they act accordingly, right? The differences in our behavior and attitudes are not because of biology, so it has nothing to do with our race, ethnicity, sex, or any supposed genetic factors. It really has really our location and our social structure. Okay, so if you were to switch places, say with street people, your behaviors and attitudes would change. A good example of this, if you've ever seen it, it's very old, 80s classic, but Trading Places, right, with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, and what their lives start to look like when they trade places with each other. Very interesting, but unfortunately, it is not school appropriate, so we cannot watch that movie. But if you've ever seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so because social structure is so vital for us, affecting who we are and what we are like, let's look more closely at its major components. So we're looking at culture, social class, social status, rules, groups, and institutions. Okay, and we're going to get through groups today in this particular lecture. So culture, we've looked at culture a little bit. Our shared culture is what makes us similar to one another, and it is what makes some people seem, quote unquote, different from different perspectives. Social class is based on income, education, occupational prestige, interests shared among people of same social class. Okay, social status, your status is your position that one occupies in a large group. So this provides guidelines for how to act and how to feel in social interactions. Try that again. So status sets, these are all the statuses or positions that an individual occupies. Ascribed are positions that are inherited at birth or receives involuntarily later in life. So, I mean, if you're a king of a country, that's going to be your ascribed position. Or, I don't know, I watch a lot of TV dramas, so, those that are very wealthy who fall in love with the maybe not so wealthy girl type of deal, that is an ascribed position because they are of the extremely wealthy class, okay? Achieved statuses, these are positions that are earned, accomplished, or involved at least, some activity on the individual's parts to actually get that particular status. A status symbol are indicators of status, especially items that are in display and that show prestige, okay? So like, for example, I have one on right now. It's called a wedding ring. A wedding ring is a status symbol. It shows everybody that I am in a committed relationship with another person, right? And it's kind of a small little diamond because we got engaged when we were very young, and didn't have a whole lot of money. So, and I'll be honest, if I have a trip to Hawaii or upgrading my diamond, I'm probably going to go to Hawaii. So I don't really care about the upgrades to diamonds. I think it's actually pretty cute. So that is a status symbol though. That is something that I wear to show people that I am married, right? And then a master status. That's a status that cuts across the other statuses that an individual occupies. And I'll show you an example here in just a second, okay? Status and consistency, that's ranking high on some dimensions of social status and low on others, and these are called status discrepancies, okay? So, as a status discrepancy, perhaps, master statuses are those that overshadow other statuses, okay? So, here is Stephen Hawking, right? The late Stephen Hawking now, who is severely disabled or was by Lou Gehrig's disease, right? But for some, his master status would be that of a person with disabilities. But of course, because Hawking is one of the most brilliant physicists who ever lived, his outstanding achievements have given him another master status, and that's world-class physicist in the ranking of Einstein. So that's what we mean by master status, okay? Social class and social status are significant factors in social life. They're fundamental to what we become, and they affect the orientations to life. So you can kind of see that from the point in this photo. So roles versus status. So now we've talked about our status place, okay? But a role is the behaviors or the obligations and the privileges that are attached to that particular status. They are already set up for you before you were born, and society was waiting to teach you how it expected you to act as a boy or a girl, right? So my son, he is super into Nerf guns, and he and my husband have very large, loud Nerf gun fights throughout the house. And trust me, like after a long day at work and I'm cooking, I'm like, please stop. But I recognize that he's just being a boy, right? And so we kind of see that as a role of a boy. Or, say with my daughter, she tells me all the time, me paint's coming off, because the pink on her toenails is coming off because she is a girl, okay? And that's kind of her role, her behavior. She's supposed to like pretty things, whereas my boy is supposed to be rambunctious, okay? Oddly enough, though, my girl sometimes thinks she's a boy and decides that she's going to grab a lightsaber and start, going at it with the boys. Again, like that's just our roles that we're supposed to be placed into. You don't have to completely follow it. But the difference between a role and a status is that you occupy a status, but you have to play a role, okay? So you are in your status, but you don't have to actually play the role. Again, like kind of what I was saying. So, I have another example here as well, but for sake of time, let's move on, okay? Groups are people who interact and share values and interests, okay? They're powerful forces in our lives, and when we belong to a group, we yield to others the right to judge our behaviors, even though sometimes we don't like it, okay? Social institutions, what are these? They're standard or usual ways a society meets its needs. So social institutions not only shape your behavior, but they even color your thoughts, okay? By weaving the fabric of society, social institutions set the context for your behavior and orientations to life. And your if your social institutions were different, your orientations to life would be different, okay? So now we're going to look at the two different perspectives. There's the functionalist perspective and the conflict perspective, okay? So functionalists really have the perspective of the fact that these institutions are what allows for us to function at a social level. So replacing members, so protecting infants and children, having a family, that's one part of it. Socializing your members, producing and distributing goods and services, preserving order, providing a sense of purpose, okay? These are all part of the functionalist perspective. It's so that we can function as a society. But conflict theorists stress that powerful groups control our social institutions and they manipulate them in order to maintain their own privileged position of wealth and power. So it totally depends on your perspective, what you think about our society and how it functions. Okay. So in sum, our functionalists view social institutions as working together to meet human needs, but conflict theorists regard social institutions as having a single primary purpose, which is to preserve social order. For them, this means safeguarding the wealthy and powerful in their positions of privilege. Okay. So changes in the social structure. Social structure is not static. We do not today have a feudal system like, Middle Ages Europe. We continually evolve and it responds to different changes in values and new technology and contact with cultures around the world. Why did feudalism stop? Because the Renaissance came in, right? And with new education, people started to realize that they didn't have to be serfs tied to the land. Again, very different. And globalization is probably one of the best examples for our modern day because our economy adjusts to the changes that are happening around the globe, okay? So what holds society together? There's mechanical solidarity, and so Durkheim's term for unity, which is a shared consciousness that people feel as a result of performing the same similar tasks. There's division of labor as well, which is splitting up groups or society's tasks into specialties. It's the exact same thing that's always been happening throughout civilization, right? We have those that are there as blacksmiths, right? We have those that are thatchers, like people that make roofs, okay? That's division of labor. And then organic solidarity, which is Durkheim's term for interdependence that results from the division of labor as part of the same unit. We all depend on each other to fill our jobs. I think often of, an assembly line when you think of this. Everybody has their own part to play, and that's kind of the solidarity of the parts becoming the whole, okay? And that is illustrated by this particular photo here, right, which is of a small farming group. So you can see how they are all part of the whole to be successful in their farm, okay? That's where we're going to stop for this particular lesson. Tune in for part 2, just a little bit down the road. Please let me know if you have any questions regarding any content through the Canvas inbox system, and I look forward to the rest of this unit with you guys. Thank you.